traditional songs performed by Gajah Mada Orchestra to start our program today. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Senate Hall, Universitas Gajah Mada, to the open lecture to strive for world-class university management in the context of rapid and dynamic regional transformation beyond 2015, and commemorating the 65th anniversary of Universitas Gajah Mada. And this day became an incredible moment for us to meet the two speakers today. We have a very great honor of welcoming Deputy President for Academic Affairs and Provost, National University of Singapore, Professor Eng Chye. Welcome. And Pro-Vice-Chancellor and President of Monash University in Malaysia, Professor Helen Bartlett. Welcome, selamat datang. And in our program today, we will have open lectures completed by questions and answer session. And let's start off today by listening speech from Vice Rector for Research and Community Service of Universitas Gajah Mada, Professor Sulaiman.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, good morning. It is a very great and pleasure and address you today. First, please allow me on behalf of the University of Gajah Mada to welcome our most active speakers, to Professor Eng Chye, the Deputy President for Academic Affairs and Provost, National University Singapore, and Professor Helen Bartlett, Pro-Vice-Chancellor and President Monash University Malaysia. Selamat datang in our campus di Gajah Mada di Blue Campus. Welcome to Yogyakarta. It is a cultural city and education city, but also tourism city. So we have the pillars of Yogyakarta: education, culture, and tourism. So again, as a leading specialist in the issues of university program and management, and as a strong partner of Universitas Gajah Mada, we deeply appreciate your time in sharing your ideas and experience with us. This year, Universitas Gajah Mada has 16th anniversary because we have not established room. It is connected as one important event to mark this important moment. The theme of the open lecture is to strive for world-class university management in the context of rapid and dynamic regional transformation by 2015. As a short expression, this open lecture is part of continuous support to provide university managers in UGM with opportunities to enhance awareness on the importance of developing quality assurance system and corporate mechanism towards world-class entrepreneurial research university. We are here. There are some participants from other university, from Yana Badra, Chungki, and some of participants from Sanada Dharma. Okay, thank you. and others from Lintas Gunung Kidul. So again, thank you very much for your participation. I thank you all and look forward to seeing fruitful discussion, and most importantly, we saw that this represents an exchange of ideas and experience in this event. So, terima kasih and success in this seminar, in this lecture. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's rapidly proceed to the open lectures by Professor Eng Chye and Professor Helen Bartlett that will be led by our moderator, Mr. Tika Dewana, PhD. I kindly invite speakers and the moderator to come over to the stage, to the speaker chair. Professor Helen and Professor Tan, please come. Mrs. Tika Dewana, PhD. She is a Director for Cooperation, Alumni and Global Initiative of Universitas Gajah Mada. Next, we'll give 2 hours and a half until 11:50 to chair the session and to introduce the speakers briefly. Thank you.
Selamat pagi Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada Bapak dan Ibu dari UGM dan juga dari beberapa universitas yang telah hadir dalam kesempatan pagi hari ini. So thank you very much Professor Tan Eng Chye for coming here and delivering the speech, and also to Professor Helen. Thank you very much for your time during your very busy time and hectic schedules. Yeah. So this is our background why we have this open lecture. That this is Indonesia today, and in 2030 we will have the needs of skilled workers around 130 million, and also we have the market opportunity in consumer services, agriculture and fisheries, resources and education, etc. This is the situation, but yeah, when we see our public university, we have around 100 public university and 3,018 private university with only 14.65% of students in higher education. So this is the number in population. This is the data in 2014. And we have very low human development index. This is the medium human development index, and Indonesia is considered low because below the medium human development index. Then we have not published so much paper, almost zero. And this is the patent applications that still limited. Where is Indonesia? Indonesia is here. So this is the number of patent applications in Indonesia. We don't have enough researchers. This is the number of our researchers compared to Singapore, Prof. Tan. This is the number. Sorry that this is not good, but this is the number of Singapore, United Kingdom, US, Germany, even Malaysia. We have the lower number of researchers. And this is the researcher qualifications. Most of our researchers are still in a master degree. Very limited PhD holders. And we have also the very limited expenditure related to the R&D in our country. Like we see compared to India and Malaysia, it's very, very low. And this is also that we spend very This is for the government 65%, but the number is only 0.1% of the overall. So this is the challenges for academicians and university managers. That's why we invite Professor Eng Chye and also Professor Helen for this lecture, because we need to learn on how National University Singapore and also Monash University can strive for the world-class and top-ranked university in Asia and in the world. Professor Helen is the Chief Executive and also President of Monash University, Malaysia, and she has been attached to Monash University for how long? For 6 years. Yes. And Professor Eng Chye is now the Vice President of National University of Singapore and also the Provost. And he is also a scientist. Your background is mathematics? Yes. His background is mathematics. So we would like to listen to both presentations from Professor Eng Chye and Professor Helen. And I will give the opportunity to Prof. Tan first. Yes, please, to present your paper. Thank you very much.
Can we adjust the slides because I think it's slanted? That one too. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for inviting me to the Universitas Gajah Mada. This is my second time in this university. So before I start, I just would like to represent NUS to convey our warmest congratulations to Universitas Gajah Mada on the occasion of 65th anniversary. Congratulations. I would just give you a brief idea on the National University of Singapore, which I would just use NUS in abbreviation. Today, I think we are quite a big university. I have 16 faculties and schools. So sometimes you use schools, sometimes you use faculties, but they are the same. And amongst them, I have 2 medical schools. Right? And 6 overseas colleges, 24 research institutes, and also 3 research centers of excellence, each of which is funded to the tune of about $150 million. In terms of the size of NUS, it's a little bit smaller than UGM. We have about 37,000 students, about 2,600 teaching staff, about 3,000 research staff, and about 5,000 admin staff. Right? So if you look at the total size of the university, it's about 50,000. Right? So it's, I would say, reasonable, quite a big university. And it is the biggest in Singapore. Where's the control? Alright, now I'm just going to touch on 2 issues. One on the university governance. In the NUS, the Provost is like the Chief Operating Officer. I'm also, I guess, in the United States or American context, the Chief Academic Officer. So all the deans report to me. In a sense, I'm the number 2 man in the university. And in terms of university governance, I would say that we have 3 major shifts in NUS. right? And this shift was over the past 15 years. We were a British colony, if you know, and we adopted the UK system. The UK system is actually very major, specific, concentrated, and they look at specialization, and we adopt the more broad-based one in the mid-90s. So, in terms of teaching, we move more towards the American system. In the 90s, we also moved from a research teaching university to a research university, and at the turn of the century, we introduced entrepreneurship, and I'll explain a little bit why. What is more important is that in 2006, we made a big change. We became an autonomous university, and I will explain a little bit about what autonomy means. Now, in 2006, the government actually gave the university the freedom, right, to really set our own directions. And it is a new type of relationship with the Ministry of Education. And what the government did was to appoint a board of trustees to oversee the university. And the ministry actually would not manage as many of the things in the university as it used to do, right? And what is important too is that the government is committed to continue to fund the universities. The reason is very simple. Singapore has no resources, only humans. So the human resource is a very important component, and we have to do our very best and to stretch our human resource. Right? So that's the basic philosophy, invest in education. And government still funds 70% of the university's budget, and this is a very sizable budget. And they have a certain formula that based on how many students to train. The other thing is that while the government funds us, in the past the government will want to check and try to approve everything. Like in the past, our professors would have to go to the government for approval. And of course the minister would ask, I know nothing about, professorship. Why do you need a Minister of Education to approve? And what is important is that we signed 2 agreements with the ministry. One is a policy agreement where the ministry says that we will provide you with this funding because we want this to happen. So they will tell you in the next 5 years how many students I need to be trained. For instance, this is how we are going to do this, and this is how we are going to measure. Now, one important thing, because of this corporatization, is government is saying, and they do not want to meddle. So we were able actually to implement many changes. Corporate governance. Our board actually has a lot of business people, and we bring in ideas from business to help the university. And business ideas, how we deal with HR. All these are actually useful ideas that we can learn. Still that we want to be a leading global university, centered in Asia, and influencing the future. These are just words. Let me just highlight. I won't have time to go through everything. And Prof. Ika has actually mentioned some of this in her preamble. Now we have emancipication, which means that more university students. Example, now China graduates 7 million people. And just 10 years ago, it was only like 2 million every year. So the big is tremendous. And it's not just China, it's India, because the societies are wealthier. There's a lot of competition now. You have ranking tables, higher education, QS, and what have you. That now people think that it's a good model and they are bringing it back, And in this case, Duke actually brought it back. It's very helpful because the industry, they actually have very good, best practices which can be adapted to the university. Right? So, just to summarize, that talent is the most important thing for a university. Right? You must make sure that, of course, the HR, the compensation is good. You also must make sure that you have the environment to keep that going. I've given you a sense of the governance and the talent management, which I think are two important aspects. One is the structure, and the other one is actually how you deal with people. And because if you look at university, a university is about people. A university is about top students, very good students. A university is about good faculty members. A university is about good admin and support staff. Alright, you need all this in order to make a good university. So talent management is actually key. Right. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Tan, for the very inspiring speech on quality management in higher education. And we have to, there is structure and people, and we have learned from National University of Singapore. Actually, I listened to Professor Tan's lecture for the first time in June in Cebu, Philippines, and it was so inspiring. Yeah, and this is what we need, and we need our friends here, our colleagues here in Gadjah Mada University to also listen to what Professor Tan mentioned in the previous lecture. And now we have Professor Helen Bartlett. Professor Helen Bartlett has worked in higher education for over 30 years, holding a senior leadership roles at all organizational levels in universities in UK, Hong Kong, and Australia. And also the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Monash University, Australia. Professor Bartlett, time for you.
Good morning, everybody. I must just correct that little mistake there. I'm not the president of Monash, Australia. I'm the president of Monash University in Malaysia, which operates in Kuala Lumpur. But I have been in Monash University for 6 years. I was with Monash in Australia for 4, and then I got the good luck and fortune to be asked to come and lead the Monash operation in Kuala Lumpur, where I've been now for nearly 2 years. Last night at dinner, we were talking about where everybody has studied, and I was so impressed with how many colleagues last night had studied in Australia. And I know it's not the only place to study, but I'd be interested to know how many in the audience have studied in Australia. Can you just show your hand? Maybe? Oh, okay, not so many. Maybe it was more the company at last night's dinner. Anyway, you'd be most welcome to visit Monash in Australia, or indeed Monash in Malaysia. We are next door neighbours. So I'm going to be focusing on really what Monash has done to build its global footprint through partnerships and collaboration. You know, we talk a lot about building partnerships, but it's not that straightforward. And I think that I can just give you a little insight into the experiences of Monash over the years in terms of trying to organise its activities around building partnerships. So I just want to start with a few words about world-class universities, what they are, what they aren't, the Monash context and strategies, some partnership models, thinking around partnership models, and then what are some of the critical success factors. You will know this, I'm sure, that there are a number of very obvious features of world-class universities. There's a lot of literature about this. They're expected to be excellent in research, excellent in teaching, have, of course, plenty of funding from government and non-government sources, have highly talented students, as we've just heard, have well-equipped infrastructure, and of course to have well-defined governance structures that are autonomous and separate from another controlling body such as government. So those are the features that we're all very familiar with. Of course, in considering, any university in the world, whether it's appropriate to get on this journey to becoming a world-class university, we have to remember that the policies and strategies in any one university or country don't necessarily transpose where, as UGM and other universities here, there is the opportunity, of course, to define your own world class, and it isn't always easy or appropriate to simply follow others. The second point is that, of course, the university rankings, which we're all pursuing, we have to acknowledge that they are here to stay. They do mean a lot to our customers, to students and to their families who do look at the rankings. So we have to think how we're going to tackle the pursuit of rankings. Of course, in terms of governance, we've just heard a lot about that. Governance structures in a world-class university also need to be probably a bit different and go beyond what has been traditionally known as the governance structure in a university. And I think that the final point here is what I'm going to be focusing on, and that's around strategic partnerships, which are key. So just a little bit of background about Monash University, for those of you that might not know so much. It's a little bit younger than this university. It was established in 1958 as a multidisciplinary comprehensive university. It's now in the world's top 1%, and with many of its disciplines ranked in the world's top 50. It's a member of what Australia calls the Group of 8, so the elite research-intensive universities. It has a turnover of about 1.8 billion Aussie dollars, and it has actually now around 65,000 students. Interestingly, from all over the world, and a number of those students go abroad for their study experiences. Not as many as I think should. Australian students, they like the environment in Australia. It's often quite difficult to get Australian students to get out of the country and go see the world. So we're really working on increasing that number. Over 7,000 staff, 10 faculties, 10 very broad faculties, and highly autonomous faculties. So a lot of devolution has been given over the years to the faculties, who some might say run almost as little mini colleges, and that can be an issue at times. Monash has a presence in many different countries, but it has a physical presence in Malaysia, South Africa, Italy, China, and in the UK and India. And I'm going to say a little bit more about each of those. And it is home now to many of the leading nations' research capability initiatives. It's a very international student community, as I've mentioned. Interestingly, the international student numbers within Australia are not so enormous as people might think. It's when you add to it all of the offshore developments that you see that Monash as a whole has about 1/3 of its students that are international. It has a big alumni network, and of course many alumni here in Indonesia and your next door neighbour, Malaysia. As I mentioned, it is a highly globalised university with a very wide footprint, And it has a pathway provider, Monash College, who also operates all over the world. And that's been very important for Monash in bringing along students to prepare them for their higher education experience at Monash. So the Monash College development has been quite critical as an initiative to build pathways into the university. So Australia has, this is a bit small, and I'm going to say more about this shortly. It has now 5 campuses in Victoria, around Melbourne. So 6 there. We actually did free up one of our campuses, which became a university in its own right.
Thank you very much, Professor Helen, for very wonderful, clear and detailed presentations on how Monash University managed to be a world-class research university through collaboration and partnership. And it is just for the information that Monash University is actually 11 years younger than Gajah Mada University. So thank you very much. Yeah. And now we would like to open the discussion and Q&A sessions for the 2 presenters. Please, we have Professor Sri Raharjo.
My name is Sri, and I have a question for each of our distinguished speakers. First, to Professor Tan. It's a very broad topic that you presented, and I very appreciate that. Of course, I must make the priority in which area that I must make my question. Only one area that I related with your presentation is on the human resources HR. You mentioned that one of the key points there is a very attractive and flexible HR. Just want to go deeper on that. I would like to compare it with our local situation here, where most of our academic staff are government officials. I mean, okay, I agree. Yeah. And for that reason, the time commitment to be spent in the university must be well managed. But the problem is sometimes some of our academic staff, they may be lured or attracted by other offering from different external offices to provide consulting, to provide any other expertise that may require time spent. So my question is, how do you manage the potential conflict of commitment in terms of time spending for the faculty members? It may not be happening in ADS, but I don't know. And for the Professor Helen, you mentioned about how difficult it is to consolidate the major research teams. For example, in Monash University at Malaysia. And my question is, could you share a little bit with us about how do you convince regarding the consolidated major teams for research when you have many faculty members from science and technological faculties and also from the art and humanities, especially when we come to agree on KPIs matrices. I personally feel the pressure here because I share the responsibility for managing research at this 18 faculties here. It's not easy job. Thank you.
I would say that there are various aspects that you have to look at. One is the structure. The other one is the recognition or compensation, right? And the third one would be, what are your expectations? All these are linked together. So yes, our faculty members, they can do other things other than teaching and research. So one example of other things would be consultancies. So our faculty members can do consultancies for companies. Companies can hire them for their expertise. All right, they do their consultancies. Companies pay them. Right? So we allow them to do it as long as they don't compromise on their teaching and research. Right? And we have a limitation. You can do consultancy for 1 day a week, maximum, or 52 days in a year, equivalent. If you exceed, we don't allow it. Right? So 52 days is the maximum that you can. But you could have a situation where a person earns more money from, so we don't have any restriction on how much they earn from consultancies. And some of them do earn a lot, so like lawyers. The lawyers, they do a lot of consultancies, they can be paid very well. But one thing is that if they do not fulfill our expectations, be it in teaching or research, right? Then I can actually tell them that since you are not doing your teaching and research well, I'm not going to allow you to do your consultancy, even though you have not used up any of the full 52 hours. Right? So we have the way to control, and we measure them every year. So one part of our compensation system is that we have a bonus which is paid every year. And the bonus really recognizes the faculty members' contributions to teaching, to research, and to service. So we make it very clear that if you want a bonus, then you have to do well in one of the 3 areas, be it teaching, or research, or service. But of course, if you do well in all 3 areas, then you get 3 times more. Right? So it has to be, so the structure has to be something simple so that people can understand. I guess we are talking about professors, but professors may be very smart in some areas, but they can be quite naive in other areas. Right, and you need something which is quite easy, right, for them to appreciate, and you have to measure, right? You have to measure it, and that we can be quite tough because if a professor who is tenured, so in NUS we have tenure is up to 65 years old, right? So usually you start as an assistant professor. You are given 7 years. 7 years, if you don't get tenure, you're out. But if you get tenure, doesn't mean that, I can relax. If you don't perform well, then I can tell them that, I can tell my faculty member that I'm going to institute a process to revoke your tenure. Right? And if you don't do well, say for a few years, then I can sort of institute that process to say that you're not performing up to the standards expected, so you don't deserve your tenure. We're going to take away your tenure. So we still have that mechanism to do that. So it's the structure, the rewards, and then how you measure that. That will sort of help you in crafting the policy.
So your question about consolidating research. In my experiences in the last 2 years, I mentioned that we went from having a multitude of research activity or strengths with no real focus. And we wanted to be able to channel our funding better. It was being kind of frittered internally without much effect. So the exercise we went through, as I mentioned, was to build themes that had resonance with our expertise within the campus, but also reflected the priorities of the region. So the themes we came up with really act as, I suppose, storylines for us to communicate to the world what we do. And they are multidisciplinary themes. So the research themes are allocated money on the basis of a number of KPIs. So they have to be addressing multidisciplinary research. They have to be doing industry relevant, or tapping into regional priorities in some way. They have to involve partners. So we encourage people to build partnerships outside of the university. They have to have a long-term strategy, so not just one-off projects that will die, but thinking, okay, where's this going to take me? So there are a number of KPIs that we set to we call the research platforms for receiving and utilising the money. It's still a work in progress. As a leader in a university, I can see it's working for us in terms of this storytelling. But I just had a conversation last week with my heads who feel that it's about control. They would like more control over the money. And this is where you get into the dilemma of ensuring that we've got strategic direction and traction in the areas we want, but also, allowing schools to have, responsibility as well. So it's an ongoing tension, but I think now people are starting to see that it's working. Our research grant income has gone up fourfold in 2 years. Our industry is just banging on our door. We've had such a lot of media coverage, and now we're having to get more organised in terms of our industry engagement, making quite hard decisions about who we want to engage with, and not just to say yes to everybody. So it's starting to have quite a lot of very positive impact within a relatively short space of time.
Can I add something? I thought useful to share a few points about research. NUS has grown to our current level, not in a short time. Actually, NUS did a few things some 20 years back, and we grow, right, stronger and stronger. So don't expect to sort of jump, say, in a short span of time. You need time actually to grow people, right? That's the reason why I advised just now that it's important that you focus a lot of attention on growing. And the second point is that a university at a different level of development would need different strategies. Right. You cannot say what's the best practice of a world-class university and then just copy. That will not work and may not work for you. So you have to adapt so that it works. So let me give you an example. For those who track China, right, you will notice that China has grown very quickly over the last 10 years. Right? And at the initial part, when China forces its university to focus on research.
My name is Eng Chye. 200 universities in Indonesia. It's a very big higher education system. We have 20,000 programs of study all over Indonesia. So what do you think we have to do? Not one of our universities is noted as world-class university. Our government has no policy about developing or making no decision, such a decision about what we should do about world-class university. So what is a chance for our government in terms of developing world-class university, which is now, I say it's very important for our future, because competition is among universities, not among program study. We don't have any world-class universities. Thank you very much.
Is your question on what should Indonesia do, all right, to manage the problem and also to sort of bring up the level of higher education? Am I right? Okay. I'm not in a position to tell your government what to do, but I thought that it's not only Indonesia.
Observations from Malaysia and what has been happening there in recent years. And forgive me, I'm not so familiar with the sort of regulatory or policy environment in higher education in Indonesia. But in Malaysia, similar problems there have been in terms of a multitude of types of higher education institutions of varying quality. So what I see is happening is, the introduction a few years ago of a quality framework. So all universities now are ranked on their teaching and learning and awarded scores. For universities as a whole and also for disciplines. And I think and you can buy into this or not, it's not compulsory, but it's really pushing universities to think about teaching and learning quality. And you can see it starting to move up a number of universities to differentiate them. Similarly, on the research side of things, they introduced a research scoring scheme similar to what the UK did, Australia did when I was working in those countries.
Professor Khan, since in US the structure of the human resources is like divided between the lecturer and the researcher. You mentioned in your presentation, and in case of Indonesia, that as a lecturer we have three duties. First is to be a lecturer, and second to be a researcher, and also for the community services in the same times. So that's why, like in the day, we have to change. In the morning we have to teach, and then during a day we do the research, and the evening we start for the community services. So I would like to know what's kind of the differences between the lecturer and the researcher in your university, and how can the research and the teaching is connecting each other, since that they do it with by different person. That's the first question. And the second, since I'm from the Quality Assurance Office, and I would like to know you mentioned about the evaluations about the teaching. You measure the learning. That is you mentioned that it's very difficult. And I think that's also in UGM we are experienced very difficult to measure the learning, because first we have to evaluate the senior, like for the senior professor, for example, like that. And also the content of the learning also is different from faculty to the faculties. And I would like to know for the more detailed information about the standard that you use to measure the learning, and also the content and the process of the evaluation for the learning in news. Thank you very much.
The first question is more direct. I may have you may have misunderstood my statistics. When I say research staff, these are actually mostly the postdocs and the research assistants. So they are basically the supporting research staff. When I say teaching faculty, I have two types. One is the regular track or the tenure track, and there's the other one, the educator track. Right. The educator track is small. It's about 1,000 people. They are mostly doing teaching. Right, and they usually will teach the more foundational type of courses, like the first year university courses. They do a bit of research, but they do pedagogical research. Right. The 1,006 of them are on the tenure track. The tenure track, in the past we used to have lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, and professor. But we changed to the American system of having assistant professor to be promoted to associate professor, and then it goes up to full professor. So only 3 ranks. For those on the tenure track, you have to do teaching and research. Right? You cannot just do one. You cannot just do research and not do teaching. You cannot just do teaching and not do research, because you will have to be on the educator track if you do that. So on the tenure track, we measure the performance for this both. So I hope it clarifies. So it's like you, it's your lecturers who need to do teaching as well as research. Now your second question is a very good question. You know, how do you measure teaching? First of all, I think you need really to measure learning over a period of time, right? And most of us don't do that, but we need to do that. We need to do how well the students, all right, perform 5 years, 10 years, 15 years after graduation.
Thanks very much for the presentation. It's very good. My name is Eddie, and I'm a first student for research from the Malaysia Faculty of Economics and Business in Cape. And the spelling is, the pronunciation is UGM, not UGM, Universitas Gajah Mada. That's the name of the university. We call it UGM. It's a bit different like in English pronunciation, but that's okay. I was at the time accepted at the National University of Singapore for my master's degree, and also as well as to Monash University, but I choose Monash because Singapore is the same as Indonesia, it's just ASEAN, and Monash is the west and the east. That's more challenging for me at that time. But that's a joke. My question is for you is about 3. The first is about fundraising. The second is about the we have like Monash and also like at US we have accreditation internationally. We have AACSB accreditation, but Monash is very beautiful. You got 3 Triple Crown, EMBA, and also Equis. We want to learn about the your experience in reaching Triple Crown from Monash University and also from National University of Singapore about the maintaining the AACSB accreditation. It is very challenging to get the international accreditation, but more challenging is to, I think, to survive on the new standards for AACSB accreditation. And I would like to know about the fundraising, how National University of Singapore and also Monash University to raise the fund, especially from the alumni and also from maybe non-alumni, which is a good university. I think it has a very big endowment fund, and we want to learn from you how to raise the fund from, especially from alumni, from your alumni. Second is how to maintain the accreditation from both NUS and from, especially from Monash, that you have a Triple Crown, which is very excellent. And the last one is maybe I would like to know about the new tagline for AACSB, innovation, engagement, and impact. You already mentioned about the impact, but not the engagement and also the innovation. The detail on the maybe an example for innovation, the new innovation on the teaching and also the research. Okay, thank you very much for we answer the question.
Now, which one should I take first? Look, your question about the Triple Crown and Monash's Faculty of Business and Economics. I'm not from that field, but I've obviously had a fair bit to do with it because the award also applies to the Malaysian campus. And I think that the factors really that have contributed to winning the Triple Crown